To discuss this and other developments, we join now this hour on eNCA by political analyst Susan Booysen. Ms. Booysen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. I mean, if you look at the history of the independents at the local government elections, they haven't really fared very well. Should we expect them to do better this time? Because there's been such a big drive in highlighting local government challenges in the last 5 years.
Yes, Dan, indeed. You've put your finger on it. The local government elections are not really conducive, or other forums either, to getting big representation for independent candidates. They generally do not fare well, even if this time around, I believe they 1,546, almost double the number they were 5 years ago. But they also suffer generally from not being able to garner proportional representation votes, and that really affects their chances because small parties generally haven't got a big chance to fare well in the constituency, in the ward elections. And that is why we've also seen some come together in that movement that Booysen Moyane started to garner as One South Africa collectively the proportional representation votes. And we also know that community organizations can band together and come and collect then the pre-R seats. So in small councils, it is quite possible that small, what we also call community parties, could be doing well and could gain a seat or two, but that is not as independents. For independents, there is not much of a chance to form or to gain these king-making positions in coalitions that will give them opportunities to punch way above the weight of their proportional share of the popular vote.
Yeah, and you've seen this rise of emergence of also new political parties which are also vying for council seats. Is going to be very interesting. But I mean, this new dynamic, if there's more independence and plus new smaller parties joining in, should we expect more coalitions to come out? I mean, just a short while ago, I played a bite from Helen Mashava says Action SA would consider being in coalition with other parties except the ANC in Johannesburg if Action SA, for example, was successful in its current campaign.
Yes, indeed, Dan. You know, coalitions and a number of coalitions we're going to see largely depend on the ability of the two bigger parties, the ANC, of course, and the DA, to sustain their bases. As they shed votes, more votes are released for smaller parties to gather up and to get better representation and to chisel away at those outright majorities that those two parties, the ANC and the DA, have in several parts of the country. But unless those big parties disintegrate or shed votes significantly, the smaller ones do not have a chance. However, we know both the DA and the ANC are going through phases where they are definitely not growing, where they're fighting to maintain themselves, their previous strengths, roughly, and to stay out of that coalition zone. And so just from the fact that these parties are shedding, there is a good chance to get more coalitions. In the last election, we had 27 nationally. It gained in prominence as a phenomenon in 2016 because of the big metros that joined the ranks of coalition governments. And by all indications, even if the polls at this stage are quite contradictory, but by all indications, the large metropolitan municipalities are likely, those ones who are coalitions, are likely to remain coalitions. Possibilities, even some parties, or some polls are talking about Mangaung and eThekwini as possible additional ones, although those we have to see. But because the parties are shedding, the big ones are shedding, and also in many councils, small local municipalities, there are 205 of them around the country, in many of them, it takes 1 or 2 seats to get a king-making role. However, and something which you have to note in this election, in a context that there are so many small parties and micro parties, the small parties are nowadays saying they are concerned about the other smaller parties. They're really micro parties, and there are so many, hundreds or so more than in the last local election contesting. And they will really be splitting that vote. And so there could be a huge standoff at that local municipalities to gain that biggest remaining proportion of the vote and maybe get one seat, but proportionately they are going to probably lose out against other slightly bigger parties that have better and bigger name recognition.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see how the independents as well perform. As you say, in some smaller towns it might be a different story, but who knows what will happen. And those three big metros that we saw in 2016, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela Bay and Johannesburg, ending up in coalitions. Some have worked well, and some of them have battled in the last 5 years. Thank you very much, Susan Booysen, for some of your political analysis this hour.